Before we begin, I'd like to introduce our keynote speaker and talk a little bit about the work that she does. So our keynote speaker for this morning is Dr. Kyra Shahid. Dr. Shahid is a visionary justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion, or JEDI practitioner and educator. She has established groundbreaking social change and healing initiatives in response to racial trauma in higher education and has a wealth of knowledge regarding strategic planning, supporting historically disenfranchised groups, and managing culturally restorative projects. Dr. Shahid earned her PhD in educational leadership from Miami University at age 26, and in 2018, she published the book, Anti-Black Racism and Epistemic Violence. This book expands her dissertation research on culturally restorative responses to the intersections of race and spirituality in higher education. Prior to joining the University of Michigan, Dr. Shahid led diversity, equity, and inclusion work on a number of college campuses across the country, including at Xavier University, where she was the director of the Center for Diversity and Inclusion. Alongside her strategic oversight in over 20 multicultural student organizations, direct support of an institutional diversity strategic plan and collaborations with other universities, Dr. Shahid also established a Stained Glass Initiative, a multifaceted response to the university's historical connections to racism and slavery that remains part of her living legacy on Xavier's campus. Dr. Shahid is also no stranger to the great value of partnership and collaboration, as shown by her collaboration with the University of Cincinnati, the University Studying Slavery Consortium, and local activists and community organizations. Dr. Shahid and her partners hosted the first slavery symposium at Northern Ohio Institution. This event attracted scholars from 5 countries and hundreds of local students and faculty and staff. In June of this year, Dr. Shahid will complete 2 years in her current position as director of Trotter Multicultural Center. So class for her. In this position, Dr. Shahid has designed, implemented, and facilitated so many wonderful and restorative initiatives for students across campus that have focused on fostering safety, wellness, and community among students of diverse backgrounds. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming our keynote speaker, Dr. Kyra Shahid.
Good morning. Good morning. I kind of feel like I'm gonna be far away, but we'll be all right.
Present.
And you got to push all the buttons because I won't know what to push.
There we go. We're gonna high floating meeting panel. There we go. Okay. Go back one.
All right. Y'all ready? Okay. I get myself situated here. As I do that, I want to ask you all to just share with me in this moment one word that describes how you are feeling now. Just call it out. How you feeling? Excited? Curious? Chill? Energized? Grounded? Okay. I love to hear it. And to be in a space where how we feel, who we are, what we are connected to, and how we experience community is a part of what we're focusing on. So I'm really, really excited about that. I will say that I am really, truly honored to stand before you today and share my own reflections on what I'm calling weighted wellness, the reclaiming the legacy of community as a pathway to healing. My reflection today begins with the transformative story that has deeply resonated with my journey and understanding of community care and wellness. It's the story, hopefully you might be familiar with it, of the Salt Eaters by Toni Cade Bambara. And it is a powerful testament to the complexities of healing and resilience within Black and Brown communities. This timeless story of a Black woman activist navigating the burdens of life invites the reader into a world where traditional African spiritual practices, Christian beliefs, Western medicine, and the embrace of community converge in a profound exploration of wellness. Now, like many scholars who have had the privilege of stumbling upon this brilliant work, I was both intrigued and intimidated by the opening line of the book, which you see on the screen now. As it reads, "Are you sure, sweetheart, that you want to be well?" The question still lingers in the depths of my consciousness as I continue my work. The author continues, "Just so you're sure, sweetheart, and ready to be healed, because wholeness is no trifling matter, a lot of weight when you're well." This cautionary yet poignant reminder of the responsibility inherent in pursuing wellness serves as a guiding principle for my remarks this morning. As scholars and practitioners around this room, we must understand the layers of complexity that underlie the question of wellness for communities of African descent. It is a question that is buried under the weight of injustice, the weight of inequity, the weight of trauma, the weight of memory. As a collective, we have witnessed and experienced injustices so profoundly perverse, so deeply troubling, vile, painful. Reimagining the scope of mental health means that we have to return, to reclaim, to reimagine, to reroute and reboot ourselves in substantive possibilities of radical hope. And this is where the roots of our wellness lie. In the face of profound challenges, we are called upon to engage in acts of reclamation, reimagination, and reconnection with our ancestral wisdom. I invite you to join me today in exploring possibility so that we might amplify the voices of community and center the principles of care and collaboration that strengthen collective well-being. I ask you what the author asks us through the text. Are you sure, sweethearts, that you want to be well? Just so you're sure, sweetheart, and ready to be healed, because wholeness is no trifling matter, a lot of weight when you are well. Framed another way, my question to you today is, how do we take control of our health and embrace our collective responsibility to maintain it? I offer you my personal insights on this question through the exploration of seven principles for unlocking the restorative essence of community care, alongside 7 strategies for nurturing a culture of communal support. As we convene this morning for the 37th annual conference, I find it fitting to acknowledge the symbolic significance of the number 7, often associated with themes of completeness, spirituality, balance, and good fortune across various cultures and traditions. For many, the number 7 embodies the concept of completeness and perfection, reflecting the culmination of cycles and the attainment of spiritual wholeness in religious and spiritual contexts. For others, 7 might represent a notion of harmony and balance, symbolizing the integration of diverse elements and forces as observed in practices like the alignment of the 7 chakra system in Hinduism and Buddhism. Some of us might also interpret the number 7 as a symbol of good luck and fortune, underscoring its association with prosperity and success. Now, whether you view it as a symbol of completeness and perfection, balance and harmony, or luck and good fortune, each interpretation that I have shared with you offers a unique lens through which to engage with our discussion today. My hope is that something that you hear today affirms you in accepting the reality that you are complete just as you are right now. That your community has the power to provide the balance and harmony you need to be successful in any environment. And that embracing who you are will bring you good fortune, the kind of fortune that propels generations into thriving. So let's delve into the question of the hour. How do we take control of our health and embrace our collective responsibility to maintain it? Perhaps the solution lies in heeding the wisdom of an African proverb that's been deeply ingrained in my consciousness for as long as I can remember. The proverb says, if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, go together. This proverb captures the profound significance of relationships, illustrating the life-giving, life-changing, life-sustaining power that is inherent in community. It is within the embrace of community, y'all, that our brilliance finds its foundation. Together, we have journeyed to Hush Harbors. We have followed the North Star. We have sat at lunch counters, marched on picket lines, cast our votes, and claimed seats at the table. In our communal bonds, we have unearthed consciousness and remedies that propel humanity towards the lofty ideals of liberty and justice, long entangled by systems of oppression. Through our interconnectedness, we access a transformative energy that transcends time, enabling us to heal past wounds, navigate the present, and shape the future. With such power at our disposal, we possess a reservoir of restoration capable of enhancing public health outcomes, including mental well-being, social connectedness, and overall well-being for everyone we come into contact with. The 7 principles essential for unlocking the transformative potential can be tracked back to the memory of the Hush Harbor. How many of you have ever heard of a Hush Harbor? Oh, okay, well, let's get into it. Much of our knowledge of what we know about these sacred spaces that are referred to as Hush Harbors stems from the research of W.E.B. Du Bois and historians who have traced the lineage and history of the Black church. Hush Harbors served as secret spaces where enslaved Africans gathered to release their burdens. It's where they could go to wail in private. Is where they could go to offer prayers and to engage in healing, to endure the harsh realities of their existence. Nestled deep in the woods, like what you see pictured on the screen, or perhaps by a body of water, these makeshift sanctuaries provided a refuge where African and Christian rituals intertwined, fostering a sense of community and nurturing hope and creativity. More than places of worship and psychological release, Hush Harbors also evolved into places where unrelated enslaved Africans became family, mending the fragments of brokenness that would have otherwise consumed them in isolation. The 7 principles for unlocking the restorative essence of community care that we learn from looking at the memory of spaces like Hush Harbors include the following. First, it allows us to think about innovative approaches to collective healing and support. The very ethos of a space like a Hush Harbor that allows us a space of collective healing and support that is embedded in this space reflects the unique experiences of Black communities and the power within them. Even when not articulated in modern terms or the language that I'm using today, the importance of communal care has always been understood in communities of African descent. Just as enslaved Africans gathered in secret to release burdens and find solace, public health practitioners of today ought to draw upon this legacy to create spaces of healing and solidarity. You can start by asking yourself, who do you belong to? Where have you found refuge and belonging? And how are you creating that for other folks around you? The second principle that we learn from a Hush Harbor is the cultural reclamation and celebration. Hush Harbors served as sites of cultural preservation and celebration, where African traditions intersected with new traditions that they learned, including Christian and Muslim rituals. Similarly, community care initiatives of today must prioritize cultural reclamation through events, rituals, and artistic expressions that honor heritages and promote holistic well-being. A question for you to ponder is, what might be one or two ways that you can reclaim and celebrate your own culture through the work that you do? Third, we look at intersectional approaches. The diversity within communities of African descent has always been acknowledged. It's always been there. And within hush harbors, providing refuge for individuals of various backgrounds was commonplace. The community care initiatives we create today must similarly embrace intersectional approaches, recognizing the complexity of identities and experiences shaped by race, gender, class, sexuality, ability, and other identity markers. So how do we, or rather, how do the intersections of your own identity inform your approach to community care? Fourth, we look at holistic health and wellness. Hush harbors, as I've mentioned, were not just spaces of spiritual solace, but they were also hubs for holistic healing, incorporating herbal medicine and spiritual rituals. Today, communities of African descent must continue to advocate for holistic approaches to health and wellness that address both physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual dimensions. Community empowerment and leadership. In hush harbors, individuals found empowerment through collective action and solidarity. Similarly, what we do today with modern community care initiatives must prioritize community empowerment and leadership, fostering grassroots activism and promoting self-determination. How are your commitments to social change visible to those around you? And what can you do to make those commitments more legible? The spirit of resistance inherent in hush harbors also lives on in contemporary advocacy efforts. Communities of African descent continue to challenge systemic inequities through activism, advocating for policy change, and mobilizing resources to address social determinants of health. What change are you advocating for within the communities you serve? Hush harbors were also spaces where elders passed down knowledge and wisdom to younger generations, fostering resilience and continuity. Today, intergenerational mentorship ought to remain a cornerstone of the way that you think about community care, with elders sharing their experiences and guiding the next generation forward, and vice versa. What are you learning from your elders today that you can pass on to students who are coming after you? These innovative principles that you see on the screen of community care reflect the strengths, resilience, and cultural heritages of communities of African descent in the U.S., providing a foundation for promoting well-being and collective thriving in the face of adversity for other communities of color throughout the world. Yes, as Tony K. Bambara character reminds us, being well is no trifling matter. There's a lot of weight when you are well. Or as one of my mentors always says to me, to whom much is given, much is required. To take control of our health and embrace our collective responsibility to maintain it, we must turn to the principles we learn, or that we can learn from the hush harbor, in order to, and we must turn those principles that we learn from the hush harbor into strategies that we can actually use to hold ourselves accountable for investing in our well-being through the communities that we belong to. Hush harbors, as you see, are a world within a world, providing access to wellness through community that might be hidden in plain sight. They still exist today. PHSAD, for example, might be considered an element of a hush harbor. Or they might continue to exist in the fugitive spaces that educators like myself create on campuses like this to support the well-being of marginalized and disenfranchised students. At predominantly white institutions like the one we are in right now, the journey for any soul that inhabits a marginalized body can be relentless. The halls of academia often fail to reflect the rich diversity of our community. And when it does, as we see all over the country right now, fear and hate rises, speaks, walks into office, and often writes itself into law and policies that people of color and allies united must disrupt and overturn so that the fullness of our humanity, of our most cherished values like life, liberty, freedom, and the pursuit of happiness can actually be realized. We are often the first to speak up, the first to stand out, the first to require a change. We are often the first in our families, the first in our class, the first to discover, create, manifest, and give birth to new realities that other folks could not even imagine. Even when we are isolated and unseen, we are often the first to serve. Creating community where there is none, and finding hope in hallways where others frequently pass us by pretending not to see our humanity. Take a look at me as an example. I stand before you today a testament to the resilience and support of my community, a proud product of the Detroit public school system, a proud product of the guidance and the influence of my single mother and the vibrant community of the east side of Detroit where I was raised. As a first-generation college student and proud graduate of an HBCU, I embarked on a journey that led to earning my doctorate, as you heard, at the age of 26 from one of the esteemed public Ivies of the Midwest in 3 years. Throughout every milestone in my life, my community walked alongside me, erecting hush harbors and strengthening ourselves through the mirrors that we provided for each other. When I looked around my campus and I saw no one who looked like me, I found a mirror in the books that were not included on my syllabus. Books by Bell Hooks, by Toni Morrison, James Cone, Sheikh Anta Diop, and of course, Tony K. Bambara. As a professional, I've utilized the principles that I've shared with you to create fugitive educational spaces in the classroom and in co-curricular spaces like the Trotter Multicultural Center. My first book, Anti-Black Racism and Epistemic Violence, embodies writing as a personal yet political healing modality that gives a firsthand account of students who experienced a hush harbor with me and learned to activate strategies of their own. Picking up the mantle of other mothering, like many women before me, and committing myself to serving as a bridge for Black students to find passageway back to our traditions of weaving together the fabric of community that sustains us all is my personal commitment to community care. Moving from surviving to thriving on a campus like this one and in the field of public health still requires use of sacred actions that link our souls to one another, even if it's just in a head nod, an acknowledgement when we walk past each other. While we may find it continuously tough to fight in, for, and against institutions like the one we are in now, I must remind us to take heed of Bambara's wisdom once more. In The Salt Eaters, Bambara writes, "Keep the focus on the action, not the institution. Don't confuse the vehicle with the objective. All cocoons are temporary and disappear." These words of wisdom highlight the importance of radical cultural competence, self-awareness, empathy, and strategy in efforts to maintain wellness. We cannot afford to confuse the vehicle with the objective. to confuse the healthcare system with the care of our communities. The actions I encourage you to take are simple, but not simplistic, as we ought not oversimplify the complexities of implementing the principles that we've just discussed as it pertains to the Hush Harbor. Like hip hop, sampling beats from all genres of music, our rooted resilience flips the script of community care, laying down a new track for healing and strength. Our first action to be able to do that is to promote collective well-being. Encourage a collective mindset where everyone prioritizes the well-being of the entire community over individual interests. Emphasize the interconnectedness of community members and the importance of supporting each other's physical, emotional, and spiritual health. Our second action is to embrace cultural healing practices. Find ways to incorporate traditional healing practices and rituals into community care initiatives. These practices might include storytelling, drumming, dance, herbal medicine, and other cultural traditions that reflect the people that you live and work with. Provide culturally competent support. I can't say that enough. So one of the biggest critiques that students have about institutions like this one. We have to ensure that the work you do to support health and social services is culturally competent and responsive to the needs of the community that you are in. Train those who you lead to understand cultural context and deliver care in a respectful and an affirming manner. Fourth, and I'm almost done, y'all, we want to create spaces for healing. Establish spaces within the community where individuals can seek support and healing without fear of judgment or stigma, or being labeled as different or new. These spaces might include community centers or support groups or cultural events that prioritize emotional well-being. Fifth, we have to foster those intergenerational connections that we talked about earlier. You have to find your elder mentors and create your own personal council of wisdom that includes elders and youth so that you can be poured into and pour out. Facilitate those opportunities for intergenerational dialogue and mentorship where elders can share their wisdom and the youth can also share their wisdom in ways that inform your understanding of community care. This is what helps us to unlock the medicine within our generations that allows us to disrupt generational trauma. 6, we must continue to address structural inequities. Find ways, whether big or small, to advocate for policies and practices that address the root causes of health disparities and structural inequities within our communities. This might include addressing issues such as poverty, racism, access to healthcare, or environmental justice. Whatever the cause is, find ways to speak truth to power. Finally, we must promote self-care and resilience. Encouraging individuals to prioritize self-care practices that promote resilience and well-being. This might include meditation, giving space for exercise during the day, journaling as a part of your common practice, and spending time in nature, as we did in Hush Harbors, as well as seeking professional support when needed. By implementing these strategies, we can create a culture of community care that fosters healing, resilience, and empowerment for all of its members. The burden of wellness need not drag us down. Rather, it should serve as an anchor, grounding us in the vastness of our collective brilliance. Reimagining the landscape of mental health necessitates a willingness to confront our true selves, shedding light on the patterns, fears, insecurities perhaps, and disillusions we often try to conceal. True wellness demands vulnerability, urging us to release that which no longer serves us and to create something new from the fragments of our brokenness. It beckons us to disrupt entrenched patterns and chart new paths forward. When we grasp the gravity of this truth, our sanctuaries of solace can evolve into vibrant hubs that are real-life Wakandas. Sanctuaries where brilliance and resilience can foster the innovation that reshapes the world. That's what real community care allows us to create. Wellness is a matter of utmost importance, for when we are well, so too is the world. As leaders, we pave the way for future generations. As creators, we shatter records and set new standards. Whether it's Beyonce blending genres, Muhammad Ali dominating in the ring, or perhaps Chief James breaking barriers here as the first Black woman chief of police here at the University of Michigan, we elevate the standard when we are whole. So I ask you all again, are you sure, sweethearts, that you want to be well? Just so you're sure, sweetheart, and ready to be healed. Because wholeness is no trifling matter, a lot of weight when you are well. I urge you to respond to that question with a resounding yes. A yes that pays homage to the undeniable legacy of resilience and strength that defines our communities. A yes that signifies your recognition of standing on the shoulders of giants and embracing the responsibility that comes with great privilege. Let your yes resonate with the unapologetic spirit, perhaps, of Little John, celebrating and embracing your cultural vernacular without hesitation or apology. Let it bridge the sacred principles of the Hush Harbor with the actionable steps that we must take to nurture a culture of community care deeply rooted in our rich cultural heritages. May your yes, in response to the question of if you want to be well, signify a release from any shackles of fear or resentment, allowing you to reclaim, reimagine, and reboot yourself in the limitless possibilities of radical hope. For it is in this profound transformation that the essence of our wellness truly thrives. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Dr. Shaheed, for that beautiful keynote address. We're going to give her another round of applause. Thank you so much. We were going to have a second to take questions from the audience, if that's all right with you. Okay, I can go around with the mic. Does anybody have any questions for our keynote speaker?
That's the mic. You don't answer, then I'm gonna answer.
Okay.
I just thought. I think I should stay.
Okay, then I'll just pass the mic to you. So, I really liked the words that you talked about specifically with the salt eaters. I think when I think about that quote, I think about, do I honestly want to be well? Like, am I going to make space? Am I going to do the work in order for myself to be well? And thank you for those words. I think about specifically the action that you gave specifically about fostering intergenerational connections. I try to find that, where in whatever academic or personal space that I'm in, but is there or are there any other tricks or ways that you were able to foster intergenerational connections within your just journey?
That is a great question. Part of it is about making sure that we don't leave our communities behind, right? As you heard me name, I grew up on the east side of Detroit. And while it wasn't the intention, I was very clear that we were meant to be skydivers in reverse, right? They wanted us to deploy out of our communities into other spaces and never return. And so part of that intergenerational connection has to be about making sure we don't leave folks behind, and making sure that we broaden our scope of what it means for us to be in relationship with one another. And so many of my mentors or my elders are not in my field, right? I'm not just talking to folks who are working in my area. And that allows me to understand different stories, different experiences that influence the work that I do. And so that has helped me to broaden what that network sort of looks like. And then also recognizing that an intergenerational connection has to go a multitude of ways. Many of my mentors are much younger than me, right? Because some parts of wisdom don't come with age, right? And so making sure that as you are connecting with folks, you don't look down and say, oh, they're a first year, they don't have anything to teach me, or I'm too busy. You never know what lessons you might learn from someone else's lived experience, and not discounting folks has helped me to make sure that those connections are continuous in my experience. Other questions? You want me to come back to this one?
Ready? Yes, so thank you for your amazing keynote. I would say something that stood out to me was really thinking about positionality and also this reflection process of really thinking about who you are, where you come from. And the quotes that were used also kind of brought up to me that wellness, although it has a positive association, but that positive association is more towards like a destination. The process isn't one that is going to be so positive or lightheartedness. Aside from creating and fostering meaningful relationships and mentorships, what are some other types of resources you can utilize as you're trying to figure out positioning, like your positionality and also claiming your power as an individual?
Great question. So there's a website called CMind that has a beautiful image of the tree of contemplative practices. I live by this tree. And on this tree, it has a number of different activities, actions that you can utilize that pushes that forward. And it breaks it down based upon building awareness, whether it's about really activating what you're learning, or creating a space to deeply reflect. There are things that you can do both daily and in a larger way that strengthens those types of connections. And so I would draw your attention there. And then I would say for me, in a personal way, what that looks like, what that includes is restorative yoga. It includes journaling, but also music as a somatic modality has been a game changer for the way I've been able to both strengthen and maintain connections, but also able to process my own reality of understanding who I am, where I come from, where I belong, and how I enter in and out of community as I move throughout my work experience, because I don't work in community all the time, right? And so finding ways that I can bring an element of community with me has also been really important. But that tree has a lot of different examples that I would pull to your attention. Yep, C as in the letter C, and then mind, M-I-N-D.
Thank you. And I would say I do have a follow-up question. Something that I didn't really think about when it came to applying to grad school was the work I would have to do is outside of my community. And that has been a very challenging thing for me to do because I want to make sure that I'm being sensitive, but also compassionate towards communities that I'm not a part of. So my question is, how do you engage with communities that might not necessarily resemble your exact aspects of yourself, but we also still share similar oppressors and similar barriers. So I'm interested to hear a little bit more about how one can go about fostering those relationships.
Yeah, that's a big part of our work in Trotter, right? What I often name for folks is that it has to really embrace the concept or the notion of relationship before task. Often when we are engaged in the work that we do, particularly when we're working with other communities, we want to go into the solution first or the task first, the thing that we've been asked to do or that we're being paid to do. And we forget those pieces of relationship that allow us to do those things differently. And when we are in relationship with folks and we see one another on that level of humanity, our shared realities become far more visible. And so while we might not have started out as a member of that community, we create and co-construct a new community, which is where the beauty of inclusion lies, right? I think so often we forget that. And so we just stay in diverse communities where there's different things, different people, different shared experiences in the same room, but they're not interacting. They're not in relationship. They haven't built a new community. They're just visible to each other. We have to take those second, third, and fourth steps to make sure that there's some blending, there's some sharing of who we are. There's a deeper level of connectivity so that whatever you're building or working towards creates a new community that would not exist without your presence, right? So that it's not, you continue to be an outsider of the community, but that you create something new together.
Thank you.
Other questions?
I'm still trying to formulate how to say this. I was really struck by your points about vulnerability as part of wellness. So often in the environmental, like ecological space, vulnerability can be seen as a negative aspect that you put onto communities and a barrier to resilience. And so I was appreciating thinking about how embracing vulnerability can create resilience. Can you talk a little bit more about how you
about embracing vulnerability as a modality to help with resilience? One of the things that my mom used to say when I was younger was that a part of being strong is being able to admit where you are weak, because you will never strengthen your weaknesses if you cannot actually face them. And I think part of what we learn from fields of study and work like trauma-informed work and healing-centered engagement is that being able to see vulnerability as a resource is what allows us to build the next step. And so part of it is changing our orientation to what being vulnerable means and being able to strengthen our own understanding of the resource that we can generate when we tell the truth. And when we allow ourselves to sort of lay open and to really critically examine where we are, who we are, and what we need so that we get the actual resources that are necessary. I come from a community that has a lot of community care initiatives. Detroit has always had lots of community care resources, but needs persist. And a lot of the needs persist because honesty about what those needs are does not exist, right? And so we're pouring the wrong resources because we don't tell the truth. And we don't own what needs to be healed, so it stays broken. And so we have to just change our orientation to really see it as a part of a strength. And then that allows us to co-create something different versus rehearsing those same sort of acceptable pieces, right? And keeping those things that we don't really want to talk about closer to our chest.
Hi, thank you so much for your keynote speech. Everything really resonated with me. One point that you talked about, I think it was the fourth of the seven, which was cultivating sort of a safe space. I'm curious what your thoughts are on like forming like a safe space in academic settings. I know at PWIs and especially at this university, they always talk about, DEI, safe space, but like, what does that, like, I know like physically creating that space is what I guess they mean, but I guess in your opinion, what else is needed to sort of create that safe space? Because I'm gonna be honest, like these safe spaces don't necessarily feel
Feel
that
safe.
safe. You know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think we also have to be thoughtful about the use of the language safe. I don't always use that language when I'm talking about space. Oftentimes I change the word safe to brave because I cannot guarantee your safety. And also because part of the work that we need to do might expose and perhaps cause more harm as we are unearthing the traumas that are shared between us. And I think many times, particularly in this day and age, we give people the false reality that they won't be challenged, or that being challenged is what makes you unsafe. And I like to create spaces where I can be honest and say, there are things that you think, there are things that you have experienced, there are pieces of you that you brought into this room that are unsafe. They are dangerously in a space where they are going to be changed. You are not going to leave here the same person. So if you're trying to hold on to that, you're going to experience some shakiness. And so I think part of it is about how we create an atmosphere where people understand that and can also agree to it, right? Sometimes we don't have the capacity to opt in to that. And that piece of losing your sense of agency re-traumatizes us, right? And so making sure that we can name collective and individual agency and make those pieces visible for folks is how we can create a safer space where people can agree to co-create something, and where we can also protect our vulnerability. It's harder today, right? A small soundbite can change someone's career forever without context. And we don't often have patience, grace, or empathy to care about context. And that prevents people from changing or for sharing. And so we've got to make sure that we are committed to the bigger ideals of where we want to go, so that as things are happening as we're trying to get there, and it might seem a little shaky, we don't lose sight of what the end goal is, so people can be free to fail, right? We talk about in the business world, embracing the concept of failure. You don't learn how to improve a product unless something fails with it. But when it comes to the social and human condition, we are a lot less forgiving with allowing us the space to really fail forward in the way we build relationship. And we've got to be able to really deal with that so that we can practice being better than who we are, and know that it's okay for us to be gearing up in that way.
Yeah, thank you. Do you feel like these brave spaces are different in academic settings versus like, you know, outside in other communities? I'm trying to think about like other examples outside of academia, but
Yeah.
I'm just curious, like your input on that as well.
Yep, they are different, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm fortunate to be in those types of spaces all the time. When it comes to academia, there is still a systemic practice, right, of the way that we manipulate our values to serve our needs at the time, right? University of Michigan is a great example of that, right? When we think about what it means to be leaders and best, we think about our elitism, and all of us love to embrace that. We're at the top, we do this and yada, yada, yada. But when it comes to talk about access and equity, that doesn't really line up with being elite. You got to choose one. And we often make that decision and sacrifice the values that we say we all agree to, right? And so in an academic space, sometimes that's harder because depending on who you are, you don't have individual agency to influence what the system does, right? Versus in a communal space, sometimes that sense of individual agency carries more weight and has more capacity to really influence where the community goes next. Some of this here is outside of our individual control and requires more collective buy-in, right? And us being aware of that consistently is hard, right? Students are like, it's the president. And I'm like, oh, I don't know that the president has the power that you think they do. But given the context and structure, that understanding of what power and agency continues to shift and change, which sometimes prevents us from being able to move forward. So yeah, it does look different in those spaces, and the stakes are higher. We work here. You're trying to get a degree here, right? And so there's a level of being invested in this space continuing as it is, we've got to protect the status quo because we benefit from the status quo. But we also got to disrupt the status quo because we don't benefit from the status quo.
Right, right.
Right? Both are true. And so we're fighting in, for, and against this system all at the same time. We're not always doing that in other spaces. And so recognizing that as we work and study here requires a different muscle, so to speak, than in other spaces.
I agree. Thank you so much. It's such a fine balance. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Any other questions?
Thanks again. I don't know if I can speak with this out loud here, or if we can have a conversation, but something that I've been interested in specifically within public health, and I know that's something that you do specifically, is how to bring spirituality within public health. I know that it's such a, I wouldn't say that it's a taboo practice, but like within public health spaces, whenever people do talk about like spirituality, it sometimes is seen as burdensome, or it doesn't really make sense. But to me specifically, it does. Are there ways that you were able to bring spirituality within your specific academic discipline, or just in any academic discipline?
That is a fantastic question. I wish I had like a gift. Yes. So part of it, and which we have to use to our advantage when institutions like the one we are in embrace the wellness wheel or the wellness model, is that we have to really understand spirituality as a dimension of wellness, right? It's not just an identity marker. It's not just a religious practice, but our understanding of holistic well-being has to be grounded in that whole picture that we all accept and understand as part of the human experience. And so that is what's been really beneficial for me as I've worked at both private and religious institutions, as well as public spaces that try to really continue with the facade that there is an actual separation between church and state in this country, and we can debate that later. But part of it is really in being able to name the utility of a conversation and the use of spirituality as a tool, as a resource, as a connection point, as a soul force, as a pathway to community, versus an optional piece that people can somehow leave to the side when they enter into public and shared space, and being able to embrace it as normal, right? If you travel, there are other countries who do this much better than we do, right? In terms of being able to embrace an understanding of spirituality as a normal part of the well-being and experience of everyone's lived daily experience. And so for me, it has been drawing those connections between what I just named and the objectives of the field in which I work, right? I'm an educator. We cannot talk about educating the whole person and leave spirituality out, right? I work in diversity, equity, and inclusion. We cannot talk about diverse, equitable, or inclusive spaces and leave the concept of spirituality out. So making those concrete connections between your field of work and how spirituality intersects with that can go a long way. Mm-hmm.
Any other question, Cassandra?
Question in the bag.
Hello again.
Hello.
So I'm a current first-year student in health behavior and health education. And as I reflect on my program, I think in public health specifically, when we think about health behavior and that health education portion, it's always geared back towards the population, but not necessarily for the individuals who are working actively to engage in the spaces, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I personally believe that as professionals, public health professionals, or just individuals who work in different sectors, we have behaviors associated to the way that we show up.
Mm-hmm.
So what has been, or what are some kind of like guidelines to owning that when we have like these health behaviors, but to that there needs to be like continual education for us to kind of have that switch go on, that like we too contribute to, you know, these barriers and these problems.
Mm-hmm. Great question. I would say partly it has to be with, it starts with rather your individual understanding and willingness to accept that you are a lifelong learner. This is true for educators as well, right? We get our degrees, we get hired, we think we have arrived, right? And we are somehow the cultivator of the space, but we're not within that space. And we don't tool and refuel ourselves. And we sometimes co-construct the harm that we say we're trying to dismantle. And many times there's a level of cognitive dissonance that happens when you are the leader that is advocating in the space that you don't recognize that that's happening, right? And so part of it has to be creating the spaces within your workspace, within your program, to make sure that there's a conversation about the facilitator, about the practitioner, about what it really means to continuously educate, grow, and experience the kind of community that you say you want to create. Every time I teach, I start my courses asking one particular question. And the question has always been, what does racial healing look like? And people look at me like, I don't know. Right? Because what we do in this society, what you do in the field of public health, you practice, you rehearse, you spend a lot of time in classrooms where you identify what the problems are. We don't spend as much time really talking about the solutions or what the space looks like with the solutions in place. So much so that when problems don't exist, we often don't know what to do with them. Right? It's true of the University of Michigan. We don't really know what to do with our Black students who are excelling. Call me when you have problems, and then we have resources, right? And so we have to make sure that we are creating the space for you as practitioners to really be able to imagine and play with what does the community look like well? And how are you practicing that so that when the community is well, it won't feel so jarring that you create and engineer a problem, right? Which for many of us, if we're honest, we see how that happens, right? That the moment things are going well, we engineer a problem because that's what we're familiar with. It's also what we know how to help. I know how to help a problem. We don't know how to be well. Right. And so creating spaces where you can constantly talk about and interrogate and practice that within your field is going to be important.
More question?
Hello again. I'm still trying to like figure out how I want to say this, but I'm kind of thinking about how we talk a lot about wellness in terms of like academia, but like as public health students, we have to like have an internship. And I did mine last summer, and I was just kind of thinking about how can we kind of disrupt the status quo in these working spaces when like they've been practicing however they do handle their business for so long. Like how can we implement wellness into like non-academic settings? Yeah, and kind of disrupt what exists currently.
Well, part of it is you've got to come up with your own personal strategy, right? When I started here at Trotter, things look very different than the way they look now. And partly is because I brought in a particular strategy that influenced the way my workday could look, right? And being able to talk with my supervisor about what are those spaces of negotiation where we could radically reimagine what this looks like, because the data tells us this, and how are we responding to the data, right? And it was from very simple things like we traditionally in student life work an 8 to 5 schedule. Students are in classes most of the time between 8 to 5. So there is this inherent expectation that you are almost always working far beyond 40 hours a week. But there's no sabbatical in the life of being a student affairs practitioner, right? And so there are just these philosophical notions, right, and systems that are in place that we have to disrupt. And you have to be thinking about what those things are. So as you are joining a new community, whether it's a new workspace, whether it's an internship, looking at the philosophy of how they work and what you need to be well, and being able to create space with your leadership team to talk about what those things are. Sometimes you will be greatly surprised by how open people are to making those types of changes, right? We see that in companies all the time with Google and et cetera, with people who are like, if we can really improve the experience of our workers, right? What we create is radically different. And I've got to imagine where you're working has elements of social change built into the work that you do. So being willing to talk about how does that reflect in the workspace is important. I try to challenge my team every day to make sure that they are experiencing the Trotter that we want students to experience. Because if they aren't experiencing it, there's a continuous disconnect, right? And subconsciously, there can become a jealousy, right? Of you're creating a space that you don't have, right? You are providing a resource that you yourself need. And so we've got to make sure that there's genuine relationship between how you work, where you work, and what you're working on. And creating that conversation can go a long way.
Thank you. If there are any other questions, I have a question myself.
Okay.
That's all right. Thank you, Dr. Shaheed.
Welcome.
You mentioned about how individuals who oftentimes come from marginalized backgrounds and identities are the ones who imagine and bring forth the new worlds and new ideas. And I was thinking about that, and that is true, but oftentimes that comes with punishment, right? For being that forebearer, for being that person to forge a new path. So in your experience, like how have you maintained hope while also still trying to forge that new path?
Y'all have good questions, right? Let's start there. Maintaining hope. I'll be honest and say it's not consistent, right? I have to often allow myself to experience hopelessness, right? So that I can maintain wellness, and experience all of these different pieces, right? And not have a false optimism that doesn't cue me into the reality of the emotive experience that the world is having right now. But ways that I refuel my hope, so that it's never fully on E, is by putting myself in spaces where great things are happening in different ways, right? What I try to tell students here, for example, like even what we were just talking about at the table, right? Like you might be in a program right now where there are 3 Black folks, but you're not at a university where there are 3 Black folks, right? And so what are those spaces, whether it's a kickback or whatever it is, that you can expand your reality of what's possible? That's where you find hope, right? We lose hope when we cannot see that what we want to create can actually be true, right? Hope is having the capacity to see those things that be not as though they were, right? And believing that what you have can become something new. And so you have to find those spaces, whether they're small, it might be, playing basketball, with a group of younger folks who still are brave enough to share their dreams, right? And so sometimes it is about putting yourself in spaces with youth who are crazy enough to think, right, that anything's possible. And we need to remind ourselves that playfulness, that childlike approach to the world is necessary. And then on the flip side, with this intergenerational piece, is being able to create space with your elders who saw worse, who saw different, right? Particularly in Trotter, right? We have students who are like, this is the worst experience ever. And then they meet students who were here in the 70s, who were here before Trotter existed. And they're like, oh man, that was crazy, right? And so sometimes it's about how do you create those spaces for your own sort of reality check, so to speak, so that you can find the hope in the in-between, right? And know that something else is always possible, right? Most of the things that we are working to disrupt, somebody made it up. Race is a made up social construct, right? Like we made it up. Capitalism was made up. Somebody's brain did that, right? And if we remember that we have just as much, if not more capacity, right, to be able to create something different or new, we're less intimidated by the weight that it exists right now. So that's what works for me.
Thank you so much for that, Dr. Shaheed. Let's give her another round of applause, everyone. Thank you.
And then I'll share, I wasn't expecting y'all to have this many questions, so kudos to y'all. But I did create a slide that has the questions within it that I asked of you all related to the principles, just as something for you to take with you, right? So as you're trying to think about, okay, I listened to her speak for a whole hour. What do I do with that? These questions might prompt you into being able to activating something that you heard, saw, or felt today. So I wanted to share those questions with you. And then perhaps before you leave today, you all might share your responses to these questions with me because I have questions myself. Okay. All right. Thank you.